All right, I hate to do it, but you love to watch it. It's time to update the Uncle Lou Top 25 ranking. I only do 3 Top 25 rankings during the course of the offseason. I do one in February after the second signing day. I do one in the beginning of May after everyone has played their spring games. I then do a third and final offseason ranking, this preseason ranking, a couple of weeks before the season starts every single year. So this will be the last Top 25 ranking I do prior to the season starting. During the season, I update my Top 25 ranking every Monday. So if you're curious and you want to keep up over the course of the season, every Monday is when I will be putting these videos out during the course of the season. I'm going to put my top 25 up. I'm going to go through it 1 through 25. I'm going to do my best to explain to you why I have some of these teams ranked, why I do. The biggest sort of complaint I get about top 25s in general, outside of, well, they're just wrong, is that you never know why somebody or some poll ranked some team where they did. So I don't expect you to agree with this ranking. This is my ranking. Obviously, no one's going to agree with it 100%. But I'm at least going to do my best to try to explain to you why I have certain teams ranked where I do. I'm also going to tell you if that team has moved up or down since the last time I did a ranking back at the beginning of May. You can click back and watch that video if you want to know where I had all of these teams ranked at in May. But if a team has moved up or down in this current ranking that I'm about to put up now, then I will tell you why it is I moved that particular team up or down, or at least where they were ranked prior to this ranking. We're going to start at number 1 and work our way down. So number 1 and number 2 for me have not changed since the spring games. I've got Ohio State at 1 and Georgia at 2. I think these are the 2 best teams in the country heading into the season. Both teams return coaching staffs. Ohio State improved their coaching staff with the addition of Chip Kelly. Ohio State is probably the most talented starting 22 in the country, top 30 kind of players in the country. You can argue over complete rosters if you want to, but they're one of the most talented teams heading into a season that we've ever seen, adding people like Caleb Downs, Quinshon Judkins, Will Howard at quarterback, all 3 through the portal. You're getting experienced future NFL players there to go along with what they already had, which is, several great recruiting classes in a row and NFL players up and down the roster. They had one of the best defenses in the country last year, probably going to be even better this year. If Will Howard is a little bit of an upgrade even over what they had last year from Kyle McCord, they're going to be a very hard team to beat. Georgia, been one of the best teams in the country every single year for the last, 3 years. They've won 2 of the last 3 national titles. Last year, they only lost 1 game. It was in the SEC championship game, preventing them from getting into the playoffs and attempting the three-peat. They also one of the most talented teams in the country with one of the best coaching staffs in the country and a head coach who's widely considered to be the best coach in the country currently now that Nick Saban has retired. Georgia's got a brutal schedule, right? Again, this is not a prediction rank. This ranking here is not a prediction of where I think teams will finish, okay? I do my rankings based off of really 2 things. Where does a team deserve to be ranked? And where do I think they should be ranked? And the difference to me, at least how I apply this criteria, where I think a team should be ranked is basically eye test and opinion, okay? Watching the teams, looking at the recruiting classes, looking at the rosters, looking at the coaching staffs. And I say, this looks like it's probably a top 10 team. And then, okay, where in the top 10 should they be? That kind of thing. Almost all opinion there. It's opinion based on some fact. Like I know I can look up the recruiting rankings, right? I know what a team did last year and what they bring back from that team, the production that they bring back, right? So it's sort of an opinion based on fact. Then I look at where I think a team deserves to be ranked. Now, deserves is hard to apply to a preseason ranking when we haven't seen a team play. You'll see more of my thoughts on where teams deserve to be ranked, or I guess where a team deserves to be ranked will be reflected more in my rankings during the season. I update these rankings every Monday during the season, and so the deserve aspect of my ranking really comes into play once the season starts, right? If you beat a top 10 team, that's obviously a great win, right? And that's something where I would say, okay, this team deserves to move up because they beat a top 10 team, that kind of thing. hard to apply a lot of that in the offseason. So, but anyway, I've got Ohio State and Georgia at 1 and 2. They're 1 and 2 in almost every single ranking you look at. You're free to disagree with that, of course. No one has to agree with any ranking, let alone mine. But I do have Ohio State 1 and Georgia 2 heading into the season. Number 3 and 4, I have switched around. And this is a result of the prediction videos that I do in the offseason. Not necessarily a result of what my predictions ended up being, but a result of the research that I do for those videos. I look into everything from returning production, coaching staffs, turnover on the roster, key players that they lost last year versus this year. Maybe there's been injuries in the during the course of the offseason that may affect one team or another. That happens to be the case, unfortunately, here with Texas losing their starting running back. Primarily, though, this is just, I think Oregon is going to be really, really, really good. In fact, I just recently did an Oregon and Ohio State prediction video, and I've got Oregon going 12-0. So far, they're the only team I've got going 12-0. I've got everybody else losing at least one game so far, with the exception of Oregon. I just think they're really, really good. So I decided to flip-flop Oregon and Texas for that reason. I've got now Oregon at 3 and Texas at 4. I've got Notre Dame at 5. So they didn't move at all. I had them at 5 after spring. I've still got them at 5 now. Notre Dame is probably the team in my top 6 or 7 that I'm least certain about. In other words, almost every year we see a team or two start in the top 10 and finish outside the top 15 or 20, and in some cases not even ranked at all. I think if there's one team inside my top 10 who's got the potential, unfortunately, to stumble multiple times and end up outside of that, it would be Notre Dame. But I'm choosing to give them the benefit of the doubt. I do think they're a good team. They return a lot. I like what they did in the portal. They went out and got Riley Leonard at quarterback out of the portal. I think they've got more talented skill position players now than at any point in the last 10 to 15 years, particularly up under Brian Kelly. I still have some questions about Marcus Freeman and his ability to sort of get Notre Dame to the next level. He appears to me right now to be basically treading water in terms of the results on the field versus what they had with Brian Kelly, right? I know the recruiting and the Notre Dame fans will say, well, we're recruiting better here and we're doing this there. I get all that. I just, as far as what we see when we watch Notre Dame play, it's been hard to tell the difference so far from what we saw under Brian Kelly. Obviously, I'm buying into some Notre Dame hype this year. I've got them at number 5. They start off this season with a road game at Texas A&M. It's a must-win game for Notre Dame. If they can't beat what most people, myself included, think are maybe the 6th, 7th, 8th, maybe even 9th best team in the SEC, they've got no business in any playoff discussion down the road. It's a huge game for Notre Dame. To be fair, I have predicted Notre Dame to win that game on the road at Texas A&M in week 1. I've got Notre Dame at number 5, with the admission that I am much higher on Notre Dame than most other people. Notre Dame's in the top 10 in almost every ranking you look at. It's not like this is completely out of the blue here for me to have Notre Dame at 5. You see them a little closer to 10 than you do 5 in most rankings. I've got them at 5 with the admission that they are probably the team inside my top 10 with the highest chance of potentially finishing outside of the top 15 or 20, let's say. If they were to lose that game to Texas A&M, they play Southern Cal, they play they don't play Clemson, do they? They play another, who is it? Is it Florida State or Miami? Anyway, they play a couple of tough ACC teams. They play Southern Cal. It could go sideways for Notre Dame. Not saying it will. I've got them at 5. There you go. That's my thoughts on Notre Dame. I've got Alabama at 6. That's up 1 spot from my post-spring rankings where I had them at 7. So Bama comes in at number 6 here. They open things up in week 1 at home against Western Kentucky. So, our first look at Jalen Milroe running Kalen DeBoer's offense will be at home in week 1 against Western Kentucky. I think Alabama is going to be a really good team, of which there's 12 or 13 every single year. My question about Alabama is, will they be really good or will they be great or elite? That's the question. And I think no one really knows the answer to that. There are a few things that I feel like I do know about Alabama. Number 1, I think they're going to have one of the best offensive lines in the country. Number 2, I think they're going to have the best running game in the SEC and one of the best run games in the entire country. Their offensive line, their ability to move people. Jalen Milroe at quarterback, his ability to run around, extend plays, quarterback draws, sweeps. zone reads, all those kinds of things. We all know what Milroe can do with his legs. He can really, really hurt you. And they've got 3 running backs that I really, really like. Jam Miller and Justice Haynes being the primary 2. I think they're set to have Justice Haynes. I think is going to have a huge year. My question marks for Alabama defense. They lost a ton off of that defense last year. They're replacing 3 out of the 4 starters in the secondary. They lost a bunch of players to the NFL in the transfer portal. Rebuilt front. Dallas Turner gone off to the NFL. Who's going to rush the quarterback? A lot of questions to answer on defense. And of course, with Nick Saban gone and an offensive-minded head coach and Kalen DeBoer being brought in, what's the defensive coordinator's name from South Alabama? Is it Steve Womack? Or I might be getting that name wrong. A lot of questions on the defensive side of the ball, primarily because you lost a lot of players and you lost Nick Saban. Offensively, my questions are about the wide receiver. Alabama has had a sharp drop-off production-wise and talent-wise, in my opinion, at the wide receiver position over the last 2 or 3 years versus where they were in like 17, 18, 19, and 20. When they had guys like, Devontae Smith and Jalen Waddle, Jamison Williams, Mechie, all those guys. They haven't seemed to have that the last couple of years. Kalen DeBoer, of course, offensive genius. We saw what he did last year with Michael Penix and a couple of NFL wide receivers. So we'll see what kind of magic he can work with the Alabama passing game. But those are the strengths and weaknesses, or sort of not even weaknesses, really, more so questions, I guess, about Alabama heading into the season. But I did move them up 1 spot to number 6. Also moved Ole Miss up to 7. Ole Miss, I think, can compete with almost anybody in the country, starter for starter. Ole Miss, if you look at these teams in the top 10 so far, Ohio State, Georgia, Oregon, Texas, Notre Dame, Alabama, Ole Miss. One of these things is not like the other when it comes to recruiting, and that's Ole Miss. Depth could become a serious issue. Depth can become an issue for any team, I guess, but certain teams are more well-equipped to handle injuries or loss of players for whatever reason. Some teams are more well-equipped to handle that than others. Ole Miss, because they don't recruit at an elite level, because they're not a top 5, top 10 recruiting team year in and year out, they don't have the depth and the quality of depth that some of these other teams in the top 25 do. Ohio State can lose a linebacker, and the linebacker that they're going to replace him with is probably a 4 or 5 star and a future NFL player. Ole Miss loses key starters, and the guy that they're going to be replacing that starter with most likely is not at that level. So that's my concern about Ole Miss more than anything else is depth and how it holds up over the course of the season. It obviously doesn't help them that they lost Quinshon Judkins to the transfer portal, one of the best running backs in the country. But Lane Kiffin has done a great job with that offense. He has struggled to win the big games. They did beat Ohio State in a bowl game. Not Ohio State. Sorry, that was Missouri. Lane Kiffin has struggled to win the big games during the season, though. Last year losing to both Georgia and Bama. In the case of Georgia, just got absolutely destroyed and blown out. They've got a favorable schedule this year, though, compared to some other SEC teams. They do play Georgia again, but Ole Miss gets them at home. But they don't play Bama. They miss some of the big boys in the SEC, so high expectations for Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss, and I've got them at number 7. Michigan, I've got at 8. That's down 2 spots. Moved them down a couple of spots. Couple of reasons, couple of things going on here for moving Michigan down. Number 1, there appears to be some uncertainty at the quarterback position for Michigan. Now, I don't really know whether to consider this a positive or a negative. I have not been high on Alex Orji, the assumed replacement for J.J. McCarthy at the quarterback position for Michigan. He's very athletic. He can extend plays. He can run around. But I have not been impressed with what little I've seen from Alex Orji when it comes to actually running an offense and playing the position of quarterback, throwing the ball, making the reads, progressing through the reads, sort of, your intermediate, your sort of 10 to 20 to 25 yard passing game. He's got the arm. He can throw it 60 yards, and I can throw a screen pass. Right? When you're judging quarterbacks at the college at a pro level, can they throw an 18-yard crossing route? Can they throw it over the linebacker and underneath the safety? That kind of thing. And I'm not convinced Alex Orji can do that. I actually liked Warren better going back to the spring game. In fact, we live streamed the Michigan spring game, and that's about all we talked about is how Warren looked better prepared to run the Michigan offense than Orji did. Now you move into fall camp, and there seems to be some talk about what might or might not be going on there with the quarterback position. There's some talk that maybe we see both of them play in game 1. Michigan plays Fresno State in game 1, so should be a win there no matter who plays quarterback. But you got to remember, week 2, Michigan hosts Texas. So they need to get this quarterback situation figured out before week 2 for sure. And the other thing with Michigan is just a lot of outside distraction going on there. Rumors that Sharon Moore may be facing some sort of suspension, NCAA investigations from every possible direction, whether you're talking about recruiting stuff from COVID or, of course, to Connor Salian's sign stealing stuff. There's just a lot going on at Michigan that's outside the world of football. I don't think they're going to fall off the map. I don't think that's going to cause them to lose to somebody like Rutgers. But it did make me sort of reconsider where I had them ranked heading into the season within the top 10. So I decided to move them down a couple of spots to number 8. Still a really, really good team. Still a probable playoff team, I think, Michigan. I've then got Oklahoma State at 9, Utah at 10, and Kansas State at 11. I can't figure out what to do with the Big 12. I'm just going to be honest with you, okay? There are some teams I've got ranked below that. I'm thinking of maybe a Penn State, maybe a Missouri, a Miami, a Florida State, a Tennessee, maybe even on down to a Clemson, maybe even an Oklahoma. There are several teams I've got ranked below these 3 Big 12 teams, Oak State, Utah, and Kansas State, that I would probably pick a lot of those teams to beat Utah, Kansas State, or Oak State, like neutral site, like, Oklahoma versus Utah. Yeah, Tennessee versus Kansas State. I'm probably leaning Tennessee there. So why do I have them ranked why I do? Well, first of all, this isn't a power rating. A power rating is just, I think team 1 would beat team 2. I think team 2 would beat team 3. I think team 3 would beat team 4. This isn't a power ranking. So I can think that a lower ranked team will beat a higher ranked team, even within my own ranking. Somebody has got to come out of the Big 12, and I am assuming and guessing that whoever does that is probably sitting on only 1 or 2 losses. And I think the 3 best teams with a chance to make that happen are Utah, Kansas State, and Oak State. I'm leaning Oak State. I really like their offensive line. They've got 6 offensive linemen that have been there for 6 years. 6 years. Just the most experienced offensive line in college football, bar none. They've got one of the best running backs in Ollie Gordon, and they got to keep him healthy. And the defense has got to play a lot better. The defense has let them down big time the last couple of years, and if that defense doesn't get better, they're not finishing anywhere near the top 10. Utah, Cam Rising is back. Several other players back that were injured and out last year. Utah is a great example of what I mentioned with Ole Miss earlier, right? About recruiting and how injuries and losing starters can affect some teams a lot more than others. Utah's been a 10, 11 win team year in and year out in their sleep, right? What happens last year? Cam Rising out with an injury, a couple of other key players out with injury. The replacements that they have to put in for those guys are not on that level, and they go 8-4. I think Utah's a 10-plus win team again this year, even in the rebuilt Big 12. If those starters can stay healthy. There's obviously no way to know that. We've been watching college football a long time. We see injuries all the time. We hate it. We never want to see it, but we know it's a reality of college football and it's going to happen. If Utah can avoid that in key places, they're going to win 10-plus games and probably finish in the top 10, win the Big 12, and make the playoffs. If they can't avoid the injury bug, they're going to be lower back down the top 25 and on the outside looking into the Big 12 championship game and the college football playoff. And then you've got Kansas State. Kansas State is one of the most exciting teams in the Big 12. I really like their quarterback. Go back and watch the bowl game last year if you haven't seen Kansas State. Avery, what's the guy's name? Avery Johnson? I'm probably getting his name wrong. He started the bowl game last year for Kansas State, looked really, really good. He'll be the starter this year. They got Dylan Edwards in from Colorado at running back. I'm really excited about what Kansas State can do. But like Utah, they got to stay healthy. So it's just a mess in the Big 12. To me, those are the 3 teams that are a little bit ahead of the others. I know that there's discussion about Arizona. Look, I really like Central Florida. They almost made my top 25 ranking. I'm really high on Central Florida this year. I think Goose Malzahn is cooking something up down there and could shock some people in the Big 12. So, yeah, I like Arizona. I like Central Florida. West Virginia was an 8-9 win team last year. We'll see what they do. Colorado's the wild card. I don't think they're going to be very good, but are they good enough if they get hot to beat one of these sort of favorites in the Big 12? Probably. What about Baylor? They're going to pick themselves back up. TCU made the national title game 2 years ago, disappeared last year. Where do they slot in this year? So there's just a lot of questions about the Big 12. Makes it hard to figure out. So I decided to put these 3 Big 12 teams kind of right in a row for the preseason, heading into the season. And then once I see a game or two, it'll be a lot easier for me to sort of separate these teams out and where they might belong within the top 25 as a whole. Now, we won't know much early on. Oak State plays San Diego State. Oak State plays South Dakota State. Utah plays Southern Utah, and Kansas State plays UT Martin. So not going to find anything out week 1, really. But anyway, that's sort of my reasoning for why I've got those 3 teams clumped together right there at 9, 10, and 11. At 12, I've got Penn State, another team that I think could make the playoffs this year. They benefit from the Big 12 doing away with divisions. They no longer have to play Ohio State and Michigan in the same season and finish ahead of them in the division just to make the Big Ten title game, right? They don't play Michigan at all this year, and they host Ohio State. Now, they've got some other tough games that they're going to have to figure out a way to win. Drew Aller's going to have to take the next step. The explosive plays, they need a lot more of those offensively, but I like their offensive line. I really like their running backs. Drew Aller, and look, I was hard on Drew Aller too last year. When you go back and you actually look at his numbers from last year, they were pretty good. He completed a very high percentage of his passes, a lot of touchdowns, and not very many interceptions. It's something like 20 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. I'm going off the top of my head, so if I'm off by 1 or 2 there. But the point is, he had a great touchdown to interception ratio, and he completed a very high percentage of his passes. It's the explosive plays that have got to get better. It's just hard, even with good players, to put together 20-play drives, drive after drive after drive after drive. You got to avoid turnovers. You got to avoid unlucky bounces of the ball. You got to avoid drop passes on 3rd and 4. It's just hard to do that. It makes life a lot easier if every once in a while you can get that pop play for 40, 50, 60 yards to help you down the field. And when you watch Penn State play, at times it looks like they're not even trying to do that. And when they do, more often than not, it just doesn't work. They've got to improve there. But I like their defense. I like their running game. I like the fact that they're not in a Big Ten East anymore where they've got to beat both Ohio State and Michigan just to get to the Big Ten title game. I don't think they're getting to the Big Ten title game, but I think they're a potential playoff team at 10-2. I've got Penn State at 12. I've got Missouri at 13. This is another team for me that is really, really hard to figure out because I'm going to be honest with you. If I was making a power rating, again, a power rating is team 1, I think, can beat team 2. Team 2, I think, can beat team 3. That's basically what a power rating is. I think there's a lot of teams below this that would beat Missouri. I really do. I know they had a great season last year, record-wise. Beat Ohio State in a bowl game. You know, they get the quarterback back. They got Luther Burden back at wide receiver, one of the best wide receivers in the country. But they lose a ton on defense. They lose the defensive coordinator. They lose their second-best player on offense, which was their running back last year, Cody Schrader, I think was his name. And again, injuries could decimate a team like Missouri. They just don't recruit anywhere near the level to be able to compete with most of the people in the top 10. But if you look at their schedule, it's just hard to find any losses. The SEC office did Missouri a huge favor with the schedule. So I feel like Missouri, when you look at their record late in October or November, it's going to look like the record of a team that should be in the top 10. But I feel like if you watch them play week in and week out, you're probably going to be going, this doesn't really look like a top 10 team. So I'm having a hard time sort of slotting Missouri into my top 25 right now. They're in the top 10 in some preseason rankings. They're 10, 11, 12 in a lot of preseason rankings. I've got them a little bit lower at 13. They play Murray State in week 1. I think they're going to have a good record, and I think they could potentially get into a 12-team playoff because of that record. But they're going to be hard-pressed to win a game no matter who they get matched up with there, in my opinion. No disrespect to Missouri. These are my honest feelings here. I've got Miami at 14. Miami could win the ACC this year. If Mario Cristobal can stay out of the way and not blow anything, and a couple of players step up on each side of the ball for Miami, I do think they have a chance this year to win the ACC. No, I'm not one of these. I don't know where this Miami's overhyped. I picked Miami to go 7-5 last year, and I think they went 7-5. So I'm not, sucking off Miami every single year. I think Miami's got a really good team. I like the addition of Cam Ward at quarterback. Mario Cristobal has figured it out from a recruiting standpoint and a portal portal point of view. He nails them both. The recruiting is really, really good. The talent level is getting better every single year at Miami. They've got a really good offensive line, which is something they've needed and haven't had for a while. Restrepo at wide receiver is one of my favorite players to watch in all of college football. They got to make sure they are okay on the back end of that defense. And again, injuries could be an issue, particularly along the offensive line. They've got a great starting line, some depth issues there. Maybe they got to avoid some injuries. Can they beat Florida State, right? And can they make their way to the ACC title game? Because there's no guarantee the ACC is getting 2 teams in. If I'm in the ACC, my plan, my goal, I got to win the ACC if I want to get in the playoffs. I think that needs to be the mentality. Is it possible that the ACC gets 2 teams in? Of course it is, but that's not something I would rely on. I think Miami's got a good shot to win the ACC. I've got them at 14. I've got Florida State at 15. I actually moved them up some. I had them at 20 in my last ranking. And while I still have some of those same doubts that I expressed in that video, there's a lot going on at Florida State that's unrelated to football on Saturdays. Lawsuits and mad at their own league and suing these people and suing that people. And, they're still balled up, sucking their thumb about ESPN and Kirk Herbstreit and the College Football Playoff Committee and get beat by 60 in the Orange Bowl. There's just it seems like a lot of looking backwards at Florida State. And I don't know that bodes well for them. They play Georgia Tech in week 0, so they're the first team on this list to play with a game in week 0, which is only 12 days away, I believe. Less than that. When is week 0? The 24th? Yeah, 12 days away. We're 12 days away. They play Georgia Tech in Ireland. Georgia Tech can beat Florida State. I don't think they will. I've picked Florida State to win that game for the record. But if Florida State... Look, these fans are already planning all this shit on Twitter and social media about they're going all the way to Ireland to boycott and protest ESPN. Again, it's a bunch of backwards looking and backwards thinking people right now in and around the Florida State program. Huge downgrade at quarterback going from Jordan Travis to DJ Uiagalelei. We'll see. I think they'll have a good defense. I don't think they're going to be as good as they were last year. And if they stroll into Ireland looking down at Georgia Tech or looking past that game, they'll get beat. Again, I don't think they will. I've picked Florida State to win a close one, but I don't think Florida State's going to be what they were last year. I've got them at 15. I've got Tennessee at 16. Tennessee's, I think, is a potential playoff team. I've got them going 10-2, which I think will probably get them into the playoffs. I've got them losing to Georgia in Athens and at home to Bama. Which means I've got them winning on the road in Norman, Oklahoma in week 4. I've got them beating NC State in week 2. These are all ranked wins that Tennessee would have. So I think they're a good team. Obviously, first-year starter at quarterback, Nico. How good is he going to be? Because he's going to be some amount of good. He's not going to be a bust, I don't think. I know there's been, myself included, it's spent a lot of time over the last couple of years thinking about how funny it would be considering the hype and the pressure that Tennessee fans have placed on Nico. How funny it would be if he just sort of showed up and flopped or was a complete sort of failure. I don't think that's going to happen. I do think he's going to be some amount of good. The question is, how good, how soon, right? Because there will be some bumps in the road. There will be some first-year starter mistakes. He will make some throws that he, as soon as he throws them, wishes he hadn't thrown them. That's just going to happen when you play a first-year guy at QB. But the Josh Heupel offense is going to run really, really fast. They have headset communication for the first time this year in college football. So if there was anything that was going to make Josh Heupel's offense even faster, that's probably it. They're loaded at wide receiver with Squirrel White. Brew McCoy's back. They got several other guys. They got probably the best defensive player in the SEC, which sounds weird to say when you're talking about Tennessee, but is it James Pierce? Or I keep getting his name wrong. But anyway, he had about 10 sacks last year. He's an All-American. He's a top 10 pick, I'm sure, in next year's NFL draft. Now, again, some of the same questions. The back end of Tennessee's defense has let them down time and time again under Josh Heupel. Will it do it again? We'll see. And then that huge game on the road against Georgia in Athens. Kirby Smart has figured out the Josh Heupel offense. At least it has appeared that way so far. They've played 3 times. This is Heupel's 4th year as coach now. So they played 3 times. Tennessee's never scored more than 2 touchdowns against Georgia. And I believe they only did that once. And the other 2 games only scored 1 touchdown. These are years where Tennessee is busy scoring 40 and 45 points a game. But for whatever reason, Kirby Smart seems to have figured that out. We'll see with Nico and sort of another opportunity for Tennessee against the Dogs if they're able to get over that hump. But it's going to be tough for them to do that in Athens. Then, of course, they've got the home game against Bama, road game against Oklahoma. It's a tough schedule, but I think Tennessee's going to be pretty good. 10-2, I have them, and I've got them ranked 16th heading into the season. Obviously, if they go 10-2, they'll end up much higher than 16. But I think this is a fair spot for them heading into the season, given some of the questions that we have. Clemson at 17. I think Tennessee and Clemson are two teams and programs headed in opposite directions. Tennessee's been wandering the wilderness 15 years. They've been the butt of every joke in the world of college football, while Clemson has been busy winning 11, 12 games a year, 2 national titles, averaging or winning 85% of their games, dominating the ACC. But the last couple of years, last 2 or 3 years, it's been a story of opposites here. Tennessee has been slowly getting better year after year for about the last 2 to 3 years. Clemson has been taking a nosedive. Dabo Swinney's inability to adapt to modern college football, not even really inability, just an unwillingness to accept the transfer portal for what it is, has not worked out well for Clemson. Cade Klubnik comes back at quarterback, an absolute turnover machine, the worst quarterback they've had in a while. I think he's worse than DJ Uiagalelei. I don't even really think it's close. He's definitely not, he's not in the same universe as Trevor Lawrence and Deshaun Watson. Where are the wide receivers Clemson used to have? Where's Sammy Watkins? Where are these guys? They're not there. The running back Shipley's off to the NFL, so they got all their eggs in the Maffa basket. We'll see how he does. He looked good last year as sort of a counterpunch to Shipley. Now he's the featured back. We'll see what that means. Offensive line issues still at Clemson. Didn't address it in the portal. Defensive secondary issues. Didn't address it in the portal. Wide receiver issues. We'll see. I don't think they're terrible. They're going to be one of the best 3 or 4 teams in the ACC. Probably. I think they were 5th in the ACC last year, so no guarantee that they're one of the top teams in the ACC, but I think they're probably a top 2 or 3 team in the ACC. They open up with Georgia. They're a 2-touchdown favorite. And in the first 5 weeks of the season, they play Georgia, NC State, and I believe Florida State. They could be sitting on 3 losses in the beginning of October, which would just be a nightmare scenario for Clemson fans. We'll see. I've got Clemson at 17. I've got Oklahoma at 18. They're a team. I'm lower on Oklahoma, I guess, than some other people are. Their offensive line is an absolute mess, and you do not want to be transitioning into the SEC with questions at offensive line, and it just doesn't look good for Oklahoma there. Jackson Arnold, the quarterback, although he's got a ton of potential, last time we saw him play, he looked absolutely horrible. 6 turnovers in his only start last year in the bowl game. He looked terrible. Now, am I saying that to say that he's going to be that bad this season? No. But it did look bad in the bowl game. Now, he's had 6-8 months now practicing with the starters to get better, improve, learn the offense, the playbook, all that kind of stuff. So obviously he will improve over what we saw in that bowl game. But if you watch the bowl game looking for signs that Jackson Arnold was going to sort of take Oklahoma to the promised land, they weren't there. The guy was an absolute mess in that bowl game. I already talked about the offensive line. I do like their wide receiver room. If Jackson Arnold ends up panning out this season, I think they've got the wide receivers to take advantage of that. And, of course, defensively, they've just had a horrific defense under Brett Venables each of his first couple of seasons there. Oklahoma fans can't, for whatever reason, well, let's not get into that. I think Oklahoma's going to have a rough first year in the SEC. I've got them at 18. They're in danger of finishing the season unranked. Their Vegas win total is somewhere around 7 games. If they go 7-5, they're not going to be ranked. 8-4 is going to be borderline ranked for them, but they're not winning the SEC this year. They're not making the SEC title game. They're not making the playoffs. They're at least a year, maybe 2 away from competing for anything like that. Again, don't tell the Oklahoma fans that. They get really mad when reality slaps them in the face, but I've got Oklahoma at 18. LSU, I've got at 19, another team I've moved way down since May, the last time I did this ranking. They just haven't done anywhere near enough. And by anywhere near enough, I mean nothing at all to address the problems on the defensive side of the ball from last year. They brought in a new coordinator, but every single major target they went after in the portal, particularly along the defensive line, they missed on. Their secondary was terrible last year, and all indications are it's going to be bad again this year. And their front 4 might be even worse. Offensively, they've got some talent, but you know what they don't have? Jaden Daniels. They had one of the best offenses in the country last year with a Heisman-winning quarterback, and they still lost 3 games because that's how bad that defense was. I like Nussmeier at QB, and I've said it a million times. I'll say it again. When it comes to just standing in the pocket and throwing the football, I think he's better than Jaden Daniels. But he can't do the running around. He's not going to give you the sort of highlight SportsCenter Heisman-type plays that Jaden Daniels did, and he's not putting up the numbers that Jaden Daniels did. So LSU offensively will be good. I do not think they'll be as good as last year. And I don't see how that defense is going to improve enough to make up that gap. It looks to me like LSU is headed towards another 3-4, potentially even a 5-loss season. I've got them in the preseason ranking at 19, but again, another team I wouldn't be shocked to see finish the season unranked. NC State at 20. Down one from the last spot. They got a big game with Tennessee early in the year. They play Clemson out of the ACC, which will be a big game within the ACC. Is this the year Dave Duran finally sort of does something above and beyond going 8-4, 9-3? NC State has been a consistently good team, I guess, right? But they've yet to really, they haven't even had like the pop year. You take Missouri, right, as an example. The first 3 years at Missouri, their coach, Drinkwitz, is basically a 500 coach. He's basically 6-6 every year. Then you turn around at the end of last season, and Missouri's sitting there at 10-2, and you go, oh, my God. Where's that for NC State? Missouri may go back to being a 500 team this year or 7-5, 8-4, whatever. We'll see. But where's that year for Dave Duran at NC State? It's just 8-4, 7-5, 9-3, 8-4, 8-4. Where's the pop year? Is this it? 10-2, good defense, brand new quarterback, a lot of expectations, but it seems like we've been here before with NC State. And then you look at the rankings in the end of November, and there's NC State at 8-4. So again, we'll see. They got a chance to prove a lot of people wrong with an early game against Tennessee. Louisville, this is another tough one for me. I was so off on Louisville last year, and apparently I haven't learned my lesson. I had them unranked heading into the season. Last year, I was not a believer in Brom. All Brom did was come in and win almost all of his games and take Louisville all the way to the ACC championship game where they nearly beat Florida State. And for whatever reason, I'm not buying it again. The guy has killed it in the transfer portal. He's reloaded everywhere where they lost as far as that roster goes. From last year to this year, they've just brought in players to backfill. They're going to be another good team this year, but for some reason, I guess I'm an idiot again. I've got them at 21. I'll tell you what it is. I can't get over it. Kentucky was not very good last year. Louisville was the second best team in the ACC, and Kentucky beat the soul and will to live out of them in the end of that regular season game. Louisville should have beat Kentucky. That was bad. And so maybe that's, I'm not a buyer. I don't know. Kansas at 22. Kansas can win the Big 12. They got to stay healthy, particularly that quarterback. He's got to stay healthy, but man, I love their coaching staff. Kansas is fun to root for, too. When it comes to football anyway, I don't know anybody that just hates Kansas. Man, I hope Kansas loses today. I think we like to see Kansas do well, and I hope they do well. I've got Kansas at 22. Iowa at 23. They're going to have one of the best defenses again. Brian Ferentz is gone as offensive coordinator, so a brand new offense this year. It can't get any worse. Right? But even if it's an amazing hire or whatever, and it seems to me it's going to take 2 or 3 years for us to see that on the field. So I still think they're going to struggle offensively. The schedule sets up nicely for them, though. I think they could win 8+ games, 8-4, 9-3, potentially even 10, although I think it's a little bit less likely, but I've got them at 23. Arizona at 24. It's a shame they lost their coach because they would have been one of the favorites to win the Big 12 this year, and they're still the 5th, 6th in the odds to win it. But they got that quarterback, Noah Fatita, back. He's one of the most exciting players in all of college football. Of course, Arizona is one of these teams that's playing in a new conference this year, so it's going to be fun to watch Arizona play all these teams that we're not used to seeing them play. But I think they're a legitimate top 25 team entering the season, so I've got them at 24. And then Virginia Tech is my sort of shot in the dark, out on a limb pick here. Looked really good towards the end of last season. Got one of the best offenses in the ACC that no one's talking about. In fact, they might have the best passing game in the ACC. I really like their quarterback, Kyron Jones. Plus, he can extend plays with his legs. They've got really good wide receivers. The defense gets everybody back from last year. And again, they ended last year really, really hot. Schedule is favorable. We'll see. A lot of people's dark horse pick to end up in the ACC title game is Virginia Tech. Again, dark horse. No one is suggesting that Virginia Tech should be a favorite to win the ACC, but when you start talking about dark horses to win or to make conference title games, Virginia Tech is a popular pick. There you go. That's my top 25 heading into the season. Boy, I feel like I said a lot there. This video must be about an hour long. But again, y'all complain about other rankings that they don't tell you where or why they have teams ranked where they do. So I try to go through this list and sort of put you inside of my head. Again, I don't expect you to agree with this ranking. No one is going to agree with 100% of it at all. But I do my best to explain to you at least why it is I have the teams ranked where I do. So I hope you at least can appreciate that. No one else takes the time to do that. So I hope even if you disagree, I hope you appreciate the effort as far as at least providing you an explanation. Again, admitting that you don't have to agree with the explanation or where I have the teams ranked. But I do appreciate you watching. And I'll talk to you again soon. Have a good morning.